Hi, it's Tim Hagen from Progress Coaching, and welcome to another episode of Coaching Conversations. And I wanted to make you aware of something very cool that we're doing on a subscription basis, and we'll put a link in each one of our episodes. But every Wednesday, we're going to be doing what we call an audio podcast workshop. That workshop will be roughly about 14 to maybe 20 minutes per episode, with each month having a theme from a coaching model, using feedback strategically, to coaching self-awareness, and so on. So if you could look in the body or in the content description of each episode, and you will see a link where you can join this subscription. These are literally 4 workshops every month teaching specific strategies to address a particular area of workplace coaching as it relates, again, to things like awareness, motivation, teamwork, and what have you. Here's the cool thing. It's only $10 per month, and each month you will get a handout that we will follow along with. So we also give you a tool for you to take notes as we go through each episode. We hope you'll check it out. Recently, I was watching some different articles and posts on feedback, and some people were saying feedback is a gift, and some people were saying it's not a gift, it's this. And, there's a lot of different views on feedback. And I think that we have to look at feedback from a historical perspective. I look at what's happened today versus maybe 30 years ago. And I remember some 30-some years ago, I was being a smart aleck to one of my teachers, actually my JV basketball coach, who was a great coach. And I remember he got very angry with me, and he picked me up by my ears, and I played for him for 2 years. And, he knew me well. He could do this, and he put me up against a wall and said, "Hagen, don't ever do that again." And I remember my mom approached him before a basketball game and said, "Did you do this to my son?" And he said, "Yes, I did." And she said, "You have full permission to do whatever you want to him if he's being a smart aleck." Now, today, we have parents who come and say, "Wait a minute, my kid's not at fault. My kid didn't do this. You're not a good coach. You're not a good teacher." And I'm giving you somewhat of a manic perspective of today's employee entering the workforce. People are entering the workforce after 8, maybe 10, maybe even 12 years of high school and college. They're entering into this environment, whether virtual or in person. Now you're part of a team. Now you've got a boss, and you have to accept feedback. It's not negotiable. And sadly, what's happened over time, and I don't know when it started or where it comes from, but the fact of the matter is we tend to accept feedback or dismiss feedback based on agreement or disagreement. We accept or dismiss feedback based on agreement or disagreement. Think about that. So often, people will roll their eyes if they disagree. They won't take a tact of, "Wow, I'm really giving off that perception." See, I think we have to look at feedback from a provider standpoint. Giving feedback's not fun. We have to almost watch what we say because it can ignite an emotional reaction. Let me give you an example. "John, I'd like to see you in my office right away, and I want to talk to you about some constructive feedback I need to provide you." They'll walk into the office. John has immediately escalated his mindset to, am I being written up? Am I being fired? Am I in trouble? Because the words constructive feedback will garner or provide a emotional reaction. Now, if I say, "John, could I see you in my office right away? I have an opportunity I'd love to share with you where we can raise our game." Now, one might say, "Well, wait a minute. The second feedback isn't targeted. It's not direct enough." The goal of feedback is to never simply give it. The goal of feedback is to give it so somebody receives it well and strategically utilizes it. Now, let's take somebody at a green light moment, somebody who's got the green light on, bring it on, I love feedback, and they have a very healthy relationship with feedback. Now, wouldn't you approach that person differently than someone who's lacking confidence, is nervous, wants to do a good job, just hates the thought of making mistakes, and they lack confidence? You would approach those people hopefully differently. The reason being is you want them to hear the feedback. You want them to accept it, whether they agree or disagree. Accepting is in agreement. Accepting is they hear it, they stay back, they understand, They understand they have a role and responsibility of receiving it. You're going to approach people differently based on who they are and potentially the situation. Now, we also have receivers of feedback. And the reason I brought up that situation in high school, and I'll never forget it, my coach just broke out laughing. And he looked at my mom and said, "Gosh, I wish we had more parents like you." Meaning, she was not going to defend me and my poor behavior. And she was right. My son got cut from the baseball team at his high school. I was a varsity coach at the high school. The varsity coach is a friend of mine. We still go to baseball games together. We have never once talked about why he was cut. So when you're running interference for people, it perpetuates. It creates a distance. It creates a lack of responsibility. I'll never forget when I was 21 years old, I was at IBM, had one of two great bosses. This is one of the two bosses, Martha Sheffield at IBM. And Martha would just give it to you directly. And I remember one day I was really tired. I was exhausted from all the feedback. And I said something to her like, I don't know if I can do this job. I'm just overwhelmed. I don't know what people are talking about. I'm in your office all the time. And she said, "Why do you think I bring you in here?" And I said, "Because you're disappointed, you're angry." I mean, come on, right? That's what we still think now, 35 years later. We get called into the office. It's usually a reaction of, "Uh-oh, what did I do wrong?" Why? Because that's what happens. And she said, "I call you in here because I care enough about you. I care enough about you to take my time to tell you things most people will never take the time to share the same thing." And I sat there and I was stunned. And she kind of stopped me in my tracks and I thought, wow, how do you react to that? And I said, "Well, what do you call that?" She said, "Tim, coaching." Now I'm 58 years old at the time of this podcast. I was 21. So this is almost, 40 years ago. I still remember that comment. And what she did is she reframed my relationship with feedback. Now, do I always love feedback? Do I get defensive? Oh, of course I do. Everybody does. So what we also have to do is teach people how to seek feedback, how to accept it, how to receive it. Let me give you an example. I just had somebody, and I had two employees at one of our client sites, and this is something called triangle coaching. There's a lot of applications, and essentially what you do is you almost have a coach as a mediator, okay? And so I sat down, and I said, "I want you to frame out one or two things you need from each other to make the relationship better. Now, before you say anything, I don't want you to say what frustrates you. I don't want you to bring up how it's impacted you. I want you to talk in professional, business imperative terms, what you need from them in a very thoughtful and sensitive communicative manner." Now, when you get that feedback from your teammate, I want you to just say thank you. I want you to write it down. And so what we did is we went through two sets of feedback. Person one said, "Here's what I need." Person two then went, and then they did a second round. But they had to take notes. And after they got the feedback, the only thing they were allowed to say is thank you. And it's called a rule of engagement. Now, the fun part was there some emotional reaction? Oh, sure there was. I said, "Now what I want you to do is we're going to get back together." I think this is a Tuesday. We're going to get back together on Thursday. And I want you to come back and share with me what you're going to do to successfully embrace that feedback and what you're going to do to successfully put into action to offset that perception or feedback. 2 days later, both people came in and they had to write it out. And it was a very successful conversation. So I looked at both of them and I said, "You know what the two of you just learned?" And they said, "What?" I said, "When we're in the moment, we're emotional creatures. We go into yeah, but Bob mode. Yeah, but that one time you, and now we go into an argument. We leave the world of discussion." And I said, "So after you got the feedback, in that moment, how did both of you feel?" They both said defensive. I said, "How did you feel writing out your reactions to the feedback?" They said, "We started to feel better." So, well, how do you feel right now sitting here together? "You know what? We should be able to do this on our own." And that's called the feedback progression. So one of the things we teach here at Progress Coaching is a whole activity-based program called feedback progressions. It is really designed to be organizational wide, getting employees, individual contributors, and leaders providing and accepting feedback thoughtfully and professionally. Again, the goal of feedback is not to give it. The goal of feedback is to provide it so someone receives it well and strategically utilizes it. Feedback progressions is 12 sets of actions for both leaders and employees and individual contributors to build a positive workplace culture by using feedback as a strategic tool. Feedback progressions, I promise you, is something that you've never seen before. Check it out. Thank you for listening to another episode of Coaching Conversations by Tim Hagen and Progress Coaching. Now, our company is always coming out with new and innovative solutions to help leaders coach their employees. And recently, we just created a new service called Coach to You, where leaders can pick and choose topics and assign 7 to 21-day programs for employees to learn and, more importantly, apply actions and then reflect and share what they're going to do going forward as a result of the learning. It's called Coach to You. We're literally bringing coaching to your employees. If you're intrigued, we'll have a link in each one of our episodes where you can get more information. And again, thank you so much for listening to another episode.